Welcome back. TV host Bill Maher's controversial comments about Islam have sparked an online petition to remove him as commencement speaker at the University of California, Berkeley. The Change.org petition to get him removed was written by a group of students at the university and has now gathered more than 2,000 signatures since Friday. It states in part that Maher is a, quote, blatant bigot and racist who has no respect for the values of UC Berkeley. And it comes after Maher's fiery debate with Ben Affleck earlier this month, in which Maher had this to say about Islam.
It's the only religion that acts like the mafia, that will kill you if you say the wrong thing, draw the wrong picture, or write the wrong book.
So you do.
But not all students are against Maher as commencement speaker. In fact, CAIR, president of the Berkeley College Republicans, said that though she may disagree with some of Maher's views, she has no issue with the invitation. Quote, he's a very prominent public figure, and I'm certain that he's not going to treat a commencement speech at a prestigious university the way he treats his talk show. Well, News Nation has reached out to the university for comment, and we've not heard back yet. And joining me now is Greg Lukianoff. He's a free speech advocate and First Amendment attorney. He's also the author of Unlearning Liberty, Campus Censorship, and the End of American Debate. Also with me, Ibrahim Hooper. He's the communications director at the Council on American Islamic Relations. Gentlemen, thank you both for your time. We greatly appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So, Greg, at this point, 2,000 signatures. Miriam Navid, the author of the petition, wrote or said to the San Jose Mercury, people say he has the right to freedom of speech, and I agree with that. The problem is that when you bring him to the university, you pretty much are putting him into a privileged position. You're raising his voice. Your reaction to that, Greg?
I think you can't understand this case without seeing the big picture. We've been following this, what we call disinvitation season, for years, and that's the attempts by students and faculty members to get speakers they dislike, commencement and otherwise, disinvited from campus because of their views.
Condoleezza Rice at Rutgers, for example, we followed that story here.
Yeah, absolutely. And the problem is it gets more intense every year. We are actually sliding down the slippery slope where it's becoming awful hard to say anything interesting and still get invited to speak on a college campus.
But is there, Ibrahim, a difference, though, here when you hear someone say we're sliding down a slippery slope, as Greg pointed out, when the petition, for example, points out some of the things that Bill Maher has said about Islam? One of the quotes they note, he said, dealing with Hamas is like dealing with a crazy woman who's trying to kill you. You can only hold her wrist so long before you have to slap her. Goes on to say, talk to women who've ever dated an Arab man. The results are not good.
Well, first of all, he's wrong about what he says Islam believes. We have issued statements on the so-called Islam and apostasy, refuting claims that Islam demands that you be killed if you become an apostate and all that kind of thing. You can go to our website, find those kinds of things. But the key issue here is honoring and endorsing views that are bigoted and hate-filled. When we challenged Hirsi Ali at Brandeis University, it was because she was being honored by the university. She's spoken many times around the country spewing anti-Muslim bigotry. We haven't said a thing. But when a university honors someone, that's when we feel we have the right to stand up and say, no, I don't want this person honored. I don't want their hate-filled views endorsed. And that's the same situation with Bill Maher. He is being honored with a keynote address at a commencement. That is a tacit endorsement of his hate-filled views by the university, and I think that creates a situation in which anybody can stand up and say, no, that shouldn't happen. We're the first ones to defend freedom of expression, the First Amendment. When the hate radio host Michael Savage was barred from England because of his views, we said, no, you shouldn't bar people from a country merely because of their views, even if they're hate-filled and bigoted. So we stand for the First Amendment, but we also believe that the First Amendment grants us the right to say, no, we don't want these kind of hate-filled views endorsed and honored by an institution of higher learning.
And Greg, let me show you the numbers. American attitudes toward Muslims. A survey found recently at Zogby, 45% hold an unfavorable view of Muslims, while only 27% espouse a favorable view. Let's just look, for example, Greg, at the one quote from Bill Maher where he said, talk to a woman who's ever dated an Arab man, the results are not good. If you insert talk to a woman who's ever dated a black man, the results are not good. Do you think that those would be defended? And this is not about free speech. It is about what Ibrahim pointed out, that it is a privilege to speak at a university. That is not a part of your constitutional rights.
My concern is that we're teaching a generation to think like censors. And whenever we have this debate, people fixate on the one speaker that they really dislike without seeing the bigger picture. That essentially, if you say something wrong, people fixate on it and they say you should not be invited to speak, not just honored, not just speak at commencement, but speak at all. And what we're finding is that students are increasingly coming to believe that they should have freedom from speech as opposed to freedom of speech.
But that's not our position. Our position is if Bill Maher was invited by a student group and he wanted to spew his anti-Muslim hate, well, maybe we'd tell people to go and hand out literature or something like that, but we wouldn't ask that it be canceled. But when he is being honored and endorsed by the university itself, that's when we believe you have the right to say, no, not in our name.
Yeah. Meanwhile, universities are very careful about who they choose for commencement speakers. They're already very cautious, and it's getting harder and harder to find someone who offends no one.
Well, I'll tell you this, Greg. When we were doing the story on Condoleezza Rice at Rutgers, the professor who was behind that, and it turned out to be a successful push to keep her from speaking, and this is no diss at all to Governor Chris Christie or the boss, Bruce Springsteen, but rather than Condi Rice, he said, well, why not have Bruce Springsteen? Again, this is not apples to oranges, but when you look at the legacy of Condoleezza Rice and the professor saying, well, let's bring in Bruce Springsteen or Chris Christie, some might say you're looking at a taste of quality, or I don't want to get myself into too much here, but you understand what I'm saying here.
Also in this year, it was the head of the IMF there was a disinvitation push against her, the chancellor of Berkeley, there was a disinvitation, even James Franco, there was a disinvitation push against him. And what I'm saying is people always argue that there's a slippery slope, that when you start excluding speakers given their point of view, it leads to this this problem, and it's getting worse every year.
Don't we have the right, the First Amendment right, to speak up and say, no, we don't want this person here? Isn't that a form of censorship, that you're supposed to sit quietly while a bigot is invited and honored and endorsed by the campus? We have the right to speak out as well.
You absolutely have the right to protest a speaker. My concern is that students and faculty members go first to, let's not have this person speak on campus, and that's intellectually unhealthy.
But that's not what we're saying. We're not saying don't have this person speak on campus. No, they're saying don't honor, don't endorse. If he came just on his own to speak on campus,
yeah,
who cares?
And that's not the case. In almost 50% of the 260 examples I'm talking about, they're just regular speeches that students are learning from examples
today
like
about
this.
Bill Maher.
But let me, and that is to the point, bringing it back, Greg. I understand a broader conversation, and you're absolutely right, but bringing it back to this specific petition with these specific remarks here, where do you stand on this case? And certainly you're right, this is a broader conversation.
Right.
To your point about, being intellectually open, and because you disagree with what someone did or their stance, for example, Condoleezza Rice going back to the Rutgers, that does not mean the door should be closed. But with this specific example and some of the quotes there and the concerns, do you believe there's ever a valid time to have this conversation of whether or not, if someone is seen as a quote-unquote bigot, if they are needed at this commencement keynote address, or perhaps the university should pass? Is there ever an appropriate time to pass?
I mean, the fact that people so vehemently disagree with him is all the more reason to hear him out. And this is an art that I feel like is actually being lost on our campuses, where we really should be teaching people to at least hear people out or what they're going to say before you try to get them kicked off campus.
So if they invited the Grand Dragon of the KKK,
so
or
Bill Maher is the
rabid
Grand Dragon of the KKK? I can't wait till Bill Maher hears
I'm just
that.
saying,
so Bill Maher is
we know that's not what he's saying, Greg.
If you're saying that it can never be challenged,
I think Bill Maher will have some fun with
that's a form of extremism on its own.
Well, Greg, I think, let's be clear, I think Ibrahim, I know he's not saying that. He's not saying that Bill Maher is the Grand Dragon. He's simply, and you can call me out on it then, I took Bill Maher's quote where he said, talk to a woman who's ever dated an Arab man, and the results are not good. I said, insert black man, and would people have the same thing? And I'm certainly
He's called for racial profiling. I mean...
It's just amazing in these debates, though, how quickly speakers are likened to Hitler and the Grand Dragon of the KKK.
Well, I'm just using that as an example of somebody. Would you endorse having that person speak and say nothing about it if they were spewing the kind of things the KKK or a rabid anti-Semite.
So let him answer, Ibrahim.
Yeah.
Greg, and let's keep it on the up. You know he's not saying that Bill Maher is Grand Dragon.
Right.
He's asking you a specific question. Would you like to answer it?
I fully support the right of students to protest and picket outside, but my point is that increasingly we just want people not to speak in the first place, and that's bad for the marketplace of ideas. And the problem is, if you exclude people you don't want to hear from, you transform a marketplace of ideas into an echo chamber.
But again, that's not our position. Our position is honoring and endorsing speakers. It should not be, or you should be able to challenge that honoring and endorsement. If they want to speak and spew hate, it's a free country.
You know what? I really appreciate you both coming on, and I'll use that little TV language, as we like to say. Thank you both for the spirited conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. Well, the story is today's gut check, and already my Twitter is on fire. Some students say the First Amendment gives Maher, of course, the right to speak his mind, but it does not give him the right to speak at such an elevated platform as their commencement. Based on those concerns, do you think the university should rescind the invitation to Bill Maher? Go to our website at newsnation.msnbc.com. And yes, we did reach out to Bill Maher.